The sun was only just creeping over the jagged hills of Dust Creek when Clara Dawson pushed open the creaking wooden door of the old ranch house. The golden light spilled across the parched ground, touching every post, every fence, every weary inch of the land she and her father had worked their whole lives to keep alive. It should have been a beautiful morning, but Clara felt the heat of the sun like the weight of a noose tightening. The ranch had been her father's pride, 200 acres of rough but honest earth, a few dozen cattle, and a legacy that meant everything to the Dawsons. When he passed 3 years ago, Clara promised him she'd hold it together, no matter what storms came. But storms had come, drought, bad markets, and debts that grew faster than the grass ever could. And the worst storm of all had a name, Lyle Carman. She could still remember the first day she met him. He'd come riding up in his fine gray suit, gold watch gleaming, a smile as smooth as the whiskey he brought. He spoke of help, and partnership, of investment, and security. She was young, desperate, and alone back then. She didn't see the snake under the silk. Now, 2 years later, his smile had changed. Carman stood by the corral that morning, a dust-coated carriage waiting behind him. Even his horses looked smug, sleek and well-fed compared to the thin beasts in her stable. He tipped his hat as if he owned the place. "Miss Dawson," he drawled, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "I trust you've had time to reconsider our arrangement." Clara crossed her arms, dirt on her hands and stubborn fire in her eyes. "I've considered it, Mr. Carman, and my answer hasn't changed." He sighed as if disappointed by a child. "It's a shame. You've worked so hard to keep this ranch. A woman with your spirit deserves comfort, protection, a future. And I can offer that. You can offer chains, not comfort," she shot back. Carman's jaw tightened, the charm cracking like thin ice. "The bank doesn't wait forever, Clara. You're 6 months overdue. The loan, the interest, it's all due next week. Unless," his tone softened again, oily and cold, "you decide to make a different kind of deal." Her heart pounded, but she met his gaze without flinching. "You mean your proposal?" He smiled slowly. "Marriage solves everything. The ranch becomes ours, and your debts, gone. No sheriff, no auction. You could live like a lady, not a laborer." Clara's throat went dry, but not from temptation. "I'd rather sleep under the stars than under your roof," she said firmly. The air between them stilled. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Carman's eyes hardened. "Then you'll have neither, Miss Dawson. The bank takes what it's owed." He turned, brushed the dust off his sleeve, and stepped back into his carriage. The driver cracked the reins, and within seconds, the wheels spun up a cloud of dust that rolled over her boots. Clara stood there long after he was gone, the taste of grit and fury in her mouth. Around her, the land stretched silent, proud, but weary. It was hers, every rock, every dry blade of grass, and the thought of losing it felt like losing her father all over again. Inside the house, she found his old photograph on the mantel, her father in his wide-brimmed hat, eyes crinkled from years in the sun. She ran her thumb across the frame. "Pa, I tried," she whispered. "But he's coming for it all." That night, the stars burned sharp above Dust Creek, but Clara couldn't sleep. She walked the fences by lantern light, checking posts, counting cattle. Every hoofbeat echoed her thoughts. 1 week. 1 week. She'd been poor before. She'd eaten beans out of a tin, mended clothes until the fabric gave up. But never, never, had she felt powerless. Now she did. 3 days passed like sand slipping through a broken hourglass. Every morning, Clara woke before dawn, saddled her mare, and rode into town, her hope wearing thinner with every mile. Each rancher she spoke to listened politely, shook their heads, and turned her away. Not one of them dared cross Lyle Carman. He owned half of Dust Creek's mortgages and the other half's fear. By the second evening, the whispers had already spread through the town like dust on the wind. "Clara Dawson's done for. The bank's taking the ranch." People pitied her, maybe even admired her stubbornness, but no one was willing to risk their own land for her fight. Back at the ranch, the sky glowed red with sunset, the air dry and heavy with the smell of dust and drought. Clara leaned against the corral fence, watching the cattle move slowly, ribs showing beneath their hides. Her chest ached. "You all deserve better," she said softly. Her eyes drifted to the old barn, her father's tools still hanging in neat rows, his workbench covered in memories. She walked inside, tracing her fingers over the rough wood, stopping at the iron branding stamp marked JD. She held it in both hands, remembering how he used to lift it proudly after every branding season. That mark means something, Clara, he'd said. It means we earned what's ours. But now, it felt like that mark was all she had left. As night fell, she lit a lantern and sat on an overturned bucket, trying to think. She'd gone over every idea, selling stock, begging for time, even offering to lease part of the land, but nothing would raise enough to stop Carmen. Her mind burned with frustration until finally, she whispered into the quiet, "You said never give up, Pa, but what do I do when they've already won?" The answer came from the shadows behind her. "You fight dirt with dirt." Startled, Clara grabbed the nearest tool, a rusty pitchfork, and spun around. The light caught the face of a tall man leaning in the barn doorway. His hat was low, his clothes road-worn, and his grin crooked. "Easy, Miss Dawson," he said, raising both hands. "Didn't mean to scare you." It took her a moment to place him. The sharp jawline, the scar running along his cheek. "Cole Bennett," she asked cautiously. "The one and only," he said, stepping forward. "Used to mend fences for your pa back when Dust Creek still had grass." Clara lowered the pitchfork but didn't relax. "That was a long time ago. Last I heard, you left this county for good." "I tried," he said, shrugging. "Trouble just don't like to let me go. Heard what's happening to your ranch. Figured I'd come see if the stories were true." She narrowed her eyes. "And what's it to you?" Cole leaned against a post, his eyes sweeping over the barn. "Your pa gave me work when nobody else would. Fed me when I didn't deserve it. I owe him. Figured if there's a fight to be had, I might as well stand on the right side of it." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd learned long ago not to trust easily, especially men with charming grins and trouble in their past. "You think you can fight Lyle Carmen? He owns this county." Cole's grin widened. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded him he doesn't own everyone in it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Clara, Carmen's not just rich, he's rotten. I've seen his ledgers before. Back when I was hauling freight, I heard talk, rumors that he's been charging folks twice the rate and skimming profits from the bank. You said he's got your loan papers." "In his office, locked up," she said slowly. "Why?" "Because if we can find proof he's been cheating people, the law'll turn on him instead of you," Cole said. "Men like Carmen think they're untouchable. But even snakes get caught if you pull the right rock out from under them." Clara studied him, her heart pounding. It sounded reckless, impossible, even. Breaking into a banker's office was the kind of thing that could get them both thrown in jail. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in weeks: conviction. "You'd risk all that for a promise you made to my father?" she asked quietly. Cole smiled faintly. "No, ma'am, I'd risk it because it's right." The morning of the auction dawned harsh and bright, as if the sun itself wanted to bear witness. Clara Dawson stood on the porch of her ranch house, her hands trembling slightly as she buttoned her faded denim jacket. The air was dry, brittle with tension, and somewhere in the distance, she could already hear wagon wheels rolling toward Dust Creek's courthouse square. She had barely slept the night before. Every hour had been filled with what-ifs. What if Cole never came back? What if they'd been too late? What if this plan was just a fool's hope? But as she saddled her mare and rode toward town, she felt that familiar fire again, the same one that had kept her alive through every bad season, every loss. "This is my father's land. They won't take it from me without a fight." By the time she reached the square, a crowd had already gathered. Farmers, ranchers, and merchants filled the dusty street, murmuring about the spectacle they'd come to see. The sheriff stood stiffly beside the auctioneer's platform, his badge glinting in the sunlight. And there, at the center of it all, stood Lyle Carmen, polished to perfection in his gray suit, gold watch glimmering against his vest. When he saw Clara dismount, a smirk touched his lips. "Miss Dawson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I see you've decided to make peace with your fate." Clara looked him square in the eye. "I came to make peace with justice," she replied evenly. He laughed, a dry, cutting sound. "The law is justice, my dear. And the law says you're in debt. Unless, of course," his eyes raked over her, cruel and possessive. "You've changed your mind about my proposal." The crowd fell silent. Even the auctioneer froze, sensing the venom in the air. Clara's voice rang out like a bell. "I'd sooner marry a rattlesnake, Mr. Carmen." A murmur rippled through the people. The banker's smile faltered. "Then I'm afraid you leave me no choice," he said coldly. He turned to the sheriff. "Proceed." The sheriff cleared his throat, lifting a paper. This auction will commence for the property known as Dawson Ranch, in settlement of outstanding debt to the Oak Ridge Bank. Wait, Clara's voice cut through the noise. She stepped forward, holding a folder in her hands, papers bound neatly and stamped. There's been a mistake. Carmen turned, eyes narrowing. What nonsense is this? No nonsense, she said, her tone calm but firm. The debt's been settled. She handed the papers to the sheriff, who frowned, flipping through them. They were official documents, signed, notarized, bearing the bank's seal. These look legitimate, he muttered. Carmen's face paled. Impossible. Those accounts were closed. Then maybe you should check the ledgers in your own office, came a drawling voice from the back of the crowd. Cole Bennett stepped forward, dusty, confident, and holding a worn leather book. In his other hand was a second folder, more papers, yellowed but damning. Because these, he said, raising the book, show every fake charge, every inflated loan, every crooked number you wrote to squeeze folks dry. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Carmen's face twisted. You broke into my office. Cole shrugged. You left the window open. The sheriff took the ledger, flipping through it, his expression hardening with every page. Lyle Carmen, he said slowly, this here's evidence of fraud. You been stealing from your own clients. That's a lie, Carmen shouted, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. This is an outrage. An outrage, Clara echoed, stepping closer, her eyes blazing, is taking a woman's home because she wouldn't wear your ring. An outrage is bleeding this town dry and calling it business. The sheriff's deputies closed in. Carmen's protests grew shrill as they took him by the arm, dragging him from the platform while the crowd watched in stunned silence. When it was over, the auctioneer cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, seeing as the debt's been paid, and the bank's under investigation, there'll be no sale today. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then thunderous. People who'd once looked away now nodded at Clara with respect. She turned to Cole, relief and gratitude softening her expression. You actually found it, she said quietly. Told you I had a knack for finding dirt, he said with a grin. Especially on men like him. Clara smiled. A real one, for the first time in months. Thank you, Cole. You didn't have to risk all that. He tipped his hat. Maybe not, but I figured Dust Creek deserved one honest victory. As the sun dipped low over the square, the crowd began to disperse. Clara looked toward the horizon where her ranch waited, still hers, still standing. The wind carried the scent of sage and dust, the same scent that had been her father's life. I didn't marry the banker, she said softly, almost to herself. But maybe losing everything was what it took to remember what I was fighting for. Cole glanced at her, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Guess the ranch stays in the right hands after all. She looked up at him, her eyes steady. It always was, and as they rode back toward the ranch, the sun set fire to the sky, turning the land golden once more, the same way it had the morning she thought she'd lost everything. Only now, Dust Creek didn't look like defeat. It looked like freedom.